Well, I feel like there's enough of you. You can come sit with us
I
up
know.
here.
Love our own fireside chat.
Hi, everyone. My name is Deborah Leff, and I'm with IBM. I'm an industry CTO for retail and consumer goods. So it's my job to travel around the world and meet with companies in those industries that are really trying to understand what are the best ways for them to take these emerging technologies and actually apply them to their business and be able to accelerate growth or differentiation or customer experience with them. And I'm joined here today with Chris from Gap. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Great. Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Chapo. I lead our data and analytics team at Gap Inc., which is responsible for bringing data science, AI, analytics, even consumer insights to every aspect of our business, from how we design our product to how we ship our products, how we assort and manage our stores, to how we create experiences in our websites and in stores.
Excellent. Well, I've been a Gap customer for years. All my kids have grown up in Gap.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Now it's Athleta and Banana Republic.
Yes.
So we've been longtime family supporters. So let's start with what the heck does it mean to do this AI thing, right? I mean, It means so many things to different people. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, it's funny. When we were talking about this beforehand, I'd say there's what I would call a business definition of it, and then a data science definition. And I'll start with the business definition. And for me, when I think about what it means to quote unquote do AI, it's creating computers or systems that actually mimic humans and actually can solve problems like people can. But they maybe do it at a faster scale, cheaper, hopefully more effectively at times. But it really is just kind of, I would say, creating that sort of environment for that.
When we first started with Watson, one of the very first use cases was in healthcare. And one of the examples was if you're an oncologist treating cancer patients, the amount of research you would need to read on a weekly basis just to stay current with what's happening with trials is about 40 hours a week. So when you think about having computers act like humans, this ability for them to just ingest this incredible corpus of data to be able to support the human, I think that's what I think when I think about AI. It's how we can empower a computer to see things that we can't otherwise see or would just take us a painstakingly long time to figure it out. That really accelerates that.
Definitely.
But I'm curious about that data science angle.
The angle, well, it's funny because if you were to, because I'm a data scientist, I would say by training, and when I think about the type of tools and I would say the breadth of algorithms out there, that's how a data scientist would think about AI, which would be now things like natural language processing, machine learning, predictive analytics. And we get so specialized that sometimes you kind of lose the forest for the trees, in my opinion, which is really around how do we leverage this new capability, which by the way isn't super new, to actually solve problems in a meaningful way.
It is actually not new, right? I have a lot of conversations with organizations that want to have a discussion around we need to talk about AI. Can we have it's boardroom level now, because if they're not adopting it, there's the fear, and one of our speakers, John, this morning was talking about the fact that if your competitors are applying AI and they're finding insights that allow them to accelerate, they're going to peel away really, really quickly. And it used to be that large companies had this inherent advantage over small companies, whether it was their size, their geographic presence. But now the world has changed, and it's the fast companies that can outperform the slow companies regardless of their size. And it's no-name brands that can activate with a Shopify on Instagram. I mean, to be in business and actually start chipping away at market share of giants, industry leaders and giants, it's more enabled today than it has been before. And so data science has been around since like the mid-1950s. It just didn't have the cool, hip names that it does now, the data scientists, the AI practitioners, machine learning engineers. And if you're talking to VCs, you're talking AI. If you're talking internally about a project, you're talking machine learning. But if you're talking with the data scientists, you're talking regression analysis. Right. It's really just the spin of it. But it is not new, and I think that the fact that the data scientists are interpreting it differently than the business leaders is actually a really important point, because it's bringing those two things together that is critical for so many AI projects.
And when you think about, just building on that that point, when we think about AI projects, we actually never use the word AI. That may be the tool we use. We talk about what are the problems we need to solve. To your point, how do we get faster, better, smarter at that. And I'll give you one example of something that we're doing today at Gap to leverage these techniques. So when we think about a lot of the fashion retailers of the future, of today, time between when you make a decision to design a product and when it gets in the store is, for folks like Gap Inc., has been historically quite long. I mean, when I've been the Gap about 3 years, but it used to be 56 weeks between when you design a product and when it's in a customer's hand. And the more the decisions you need to make on things like, well, what color, what's the size, what's the trend going to be, the more you can get confidence in those, but also shrink that 56 weeks down, the better off you're going to be. So we're doing some examples of things where we're beginning to put product in store, get initial reads of product, and then using data science and AI, begin to understand, well, who are the customers that's going to sell more for? How do we assort our stores better, the broad set of stores? And how do we, quite frankly, shrink that time down between when we're making the decision of buying a ton of product and when it actually hits the store?
So you actually touched on something really important, and that is the most successful projects start at the end.
Right.
And it's really not, I want to create a model that does this. It's, I want to drive this outcome.
Correct.
Right? We can do a better job going to market if we could predict what customers are likely to purchase this style in this size, and then have that inform the decision tree coming backwards so that you're optimizing those processes.
Right.
And I'd say pretty much all of the projects that we're involved in, we always ask, what's the outcome you're trying to drive? How will you measure it? Like, how will you actually know if you succeeded? Because if you understand that measurement criteria, you understand where that model's going to go, right? Some models the output is going to be on a dashboard, and a decision maker is going to take that information and make a decision. But other models are going to live in a process.
Right.
They're going to be part of a website. They're going to be part of a mobile app. They're going to inform a decision with streaming data real time. But depending on where it's going, it's going to have a huge impact on the way the model is built. Because a model that needs to handle streaming data for real-time decisioning is so different than a model that's going to be, the output might appear in a spreadsheet. That could be a highly computational, complex model that actually can't run real time. And so by understanding where it's going, you design it from that endpoint backwards, and you have a much greater chance of being successful.
I'd love to build on that as well, I think. So starting with the end state in mind and making sure we design for that is super important. Another thing I've found to be really important, particularly when we think about AI, is actually starting simple on the solution. Because oftentimes people will want to imagine a world where we're doing this amazing, fancy unicorn sprinkling pixie dust sort of world. But the reality is, start simple and you can actually prove your way into the complexity. So an example of this, where I've talked with a lot of, even internally with our teams, around personalizing our websites or personalizing our email streams. When I first started talking to some of our marketing teams around this, they said, oh, well, I've heard that Starbucks has an app where they personalize to a segment of 12 million people. They have 12 million segments, so it's almost like one-to-one personalization.
Yeah.
They're like, we want that. And I say, as I work with teams, like, well, we're not ready for that, because do you have the content for it? Do you have the strategies for it? And so when we start pretty simple and then we add the complexity, that's where we've actually begun to not only, I would say, show value quicker, but also help particularly our businesses who aren't really versed in data to understand the process, feel comfortable with it.
So what comes to mind when you're saying that is, I mean, have you guys seen that where an executive's like, hey, this person has this, we need something like that too?
Yeah.
And like the question then is, so if you also had 12 million segments, would that help you? Would that actually deliver value? And I do a lot of speaking for IBM, and one of the things that I talk about is that if you actually look at the disruptive companies, the Ubers, the Airbnbs, the Amazon, Apple, what's amazing about what they've done is that they've come into established markets and they've rethought the customer experience. And things we didn't know we needed, like, I live in New York City, I take taxis all of the time. I didn't know that it wasn't good enough. I didn't know that I actually would like a clean taxi that smells nice, that has power and water. Who knew?
It doesn't get lost.
Who knew I needed that? But now, the whole way they've assembled is about it's really rethinking the customer experience. Right. So when you come at an AI project, I always say, what if you can answer the question, what are you trying to do for your customer? How are you trying to make the world a better place for them? Whether it's more fashionable and more enjoyable, or it's safer, or if it's just more convenient. But always think in terms of how are we trying to make the world a better place? Because those are the most successful projects. They have a mission, if you will, as opposed to just, oh, we want to do this. And then when you get into the thick of a project, like trying to create that many million segmentations, and it gets hard, they die and they fail. And I think CIO Dive magazine says that only 13% of data science projects actually make it into production. 13%. I mean, that's a staggering number. Do you think that number's true? Does that ring true for you?
It rings true for me, 1 out of every 10 historically. And I think, I mean, it goes back to what we just talked about, where I see a lot of them failing is they're starting from the technology first, trying to get super complex. And I'd say the third thing, maybe to add on to it, is they don't always have the right people as part of the core team when you're trying to bring that project to life. So example of this, like when I'm trying to get our teams, again, it's about creating conditions for success. One of those conditions is I try to make sure I've got someone, if it is a customer-facing experience, I have a CI person part of that team. Making sure we actually have UX and design, and UX not being just visual design, but experience design folks as part of that team that you're trying to stand up to bring a solution to life, particularly at the beginning, because as I said, it's not necessarily about the fanciness of the model or sophistication at the beginning. It's around the thing that actually, I would say drives the most value, which is really around creating, in many things, just a better experience for customers.
Forrester says we're 5 years into the age of the customer. Yeah. And given how these digital leaders have set the bar on customer experience, companies actually really no longer compete against the closest competitor.
Correct.
Right? So one retailer isn't necessarily competing against the next retailer. You're actually competing against the best customer experience someone else has provided to you. So if I can call up a ride-sharing service on my app in just a few moments, I kind of want the same level of experience when I call my bank, or I need to file an insurance claim, or I place an order for something online. And that has really changed the rules for so many, because the customers, especially the millennials, which are now our largest buying group, the trends that we see in millennials is that they're not a very loyal purchaser. And so therefore you're competing on customer experience very much.
Right.
But that leads me to wondering, okay, so we've all heard the hype cycle,
right,
and marketing has now gotten a hold of this AI and like really convinced us that everyone needs to be thinking about how to be applying data science and AI in order to strengthen our businesses. If we all know that, why do you think it's not more mainstream?
Well, I think but there's probably many reasons, but maybe one of the biggest ones is goes back to what we've heard multiple times over the last couple of days is sometimes people think of this as all I need to do is tell people or throw money at a problem or put a technology in, and success comes out the end. And you even shared the stat from the CIO magazine, that just doesn't happen. And so my big sense is part of the reason we're not doing it is, broadly speaking, is we don't have the right leadership support to make sure we create the conditions for AI success. A lot of startups do that because by definition you kind of have to, because they're going to run out of money or they're not getting the investment. And so,
or they don't have the legacy systems that are holding them back.
Right. But when I think a company like mine, which is 50 years old this summer, which is amazing and has a lot of legacy, and both from a brand and kind of even defining how specialty retail came to life, but changing how we work is pretty challenging. So I've had the opportunity to spend time with our board and with our senior leaders, and I think the big challenge that we face, just to be clear, is, as I mentioned, my scope is everything from design of product all the way to shipping and even people analytics, is where do we start? Where do we focus so that we can actually drive change in the organization using AI, data science, as opposed to saying we have to do everything all at once. I think that's the biggest problem that most big companies face is the focus component. It's not the technology.
So one of the things that's really near and dear to IBM's heart as well as my own personal heart is that Harvard Business Review came out with an article about a year and a half ago. And this is around the time where a lot of press about how AI is going to disintermediate a lot of jobs and going to take away a lot of jobs. And what the article said was that AI is not going to replace managers, but managers that use AI is going to replace those that don't. And so I think one of the biggest opportunities for all of us today is to figure out how we educate the business leaders across the organization. Because it used to be, it was okay, right? Data science has been around since the mid-1950s. We've had statisticians and quants and research analysts embedded in operations all across organizations. The difference is, they were like in a basement, no windowless room with a data set and a terminal. And they did their work on their own. Now, with the explosion of data and the elasticity around cloud computing and all of the power that that brings to what machines can do for us, it has stepped into the forefront. But before, it wasn't, a leader didn't need to necessarily know what the data scientist was doing. Now that data science is so stepped into the forefront, it's actually really important that business leaders understand these concepts, right? They understand, listen, I don't know about you, but if I'm with a business leader, head of, P&L owner, and someone mentions neural networks or unsupervised learning, they're like immediately glossed over. They don't even want to know from this. But the concepts behind what it means for them, what it means that it can do, allows them to start imagining what are the things they wished they could predict in their job role that would actually make them more successful. And we're starting to see that awakening of business leaders wanting to understand how machine learning works, what does AI really mean for them, and how they can leverage it successfully. And those leaders are going to be the most in demand, because once they do it in their organization, they're going to be ignited in terms of the things they can do for other organizations. I think that's so important that, whether it's a Coursera course, whether it's YouTube videos, whether it's an IBM conference, if you want to know anything about that, I'm happy to tell you. But really making sure there are resources for executives is so critical.
And I think that's super important. That starts from the top, if you will. But also I believe that there's the build from the masses as well, particularly for larger companies. And so I get inspired by some of the work that LinkedIn has done, they talked about yesterday, Airbnb has done around data universities and organizations, where it's not just about how do we train data scientists to be great data scientists, but if I'm a marketer, how do what should I know about AI? Like what should I know about, to your point, how I apply it? And then I'd say the third piece, and this is something, there's an article that's probably about 5 years old now called Analyzing the Analyzers, which is kind of a fun article. It's a
Shrinking the Shrinks?
Shrinking the Shrinks. Well, actually, it's funny because it's an article by data scientists about data scientists. And they did some research, and they began to classify data scientists into different categories, ones which are traditionally like the data researchers. So these are the people, to your point, we might have historically thought of the back of the house. There's the data creatives, the people who tell the stories of the data. There's the, I would say the data algorithmic folks, I forgot the exact name, but the ones who are more, I guess, software engineers.
Modeling, spending time modeling.
Spending time modeling. And then the last one, which I think is super important, which is they call the data business person or the data entrepreneur, which is someone who truly has the understanding of the methods, but also has the passion to drive business. And those are the ones, if you can get enough of those in your organization, that to me is how you can begin to make it real, because you may have the buy-in from the execs, but if you can't deliver it, it's a recipe for disaster.
So you actually touched on something really important to mention. So you can imagine we see a lot of projects across IBM and across all of our clients, across all industries around the world. And one of the things that we've really been investing in is trying to understand, why aren't more of these projects successful? What actually holds companies back? And what you just said is actually one of the observations. So it's the second one. The first one, because it's the most important, is data. Data is this double-edged sword. It's what makes all of these analytics and capabilities possible, but yet practically speaking in organizations, they're highly siloed. They have different owners, and I might even say fiefdoms, if you will, because I've had data scientists look me in the face and say, we could do that project, but we can't get access to the data. And I'm like, and your management's allowing that to go on? Like, you need access to that data. It's different formats. It's structured, it's unstructured, it's video files, it's images, it's different types of data. it lives in different places. It has different security and privacy requirements. And so just every data project starts with, okay, well, we're gonna need like a few months to actually get the data together and get it ready. And that really just drags projects down. And so we've been investing in, okay, what can you do about that? The second one is collaboration. And when the data scientist was an individual in a room working behind their terminal, that was very different. And you really didn't quite acutely feel the different skill sets that you just mentioned. But now that it's a team sport and the importance of that work is now being embedded into the fabric of the company, the ability to collaborate with anyone in that continuum, people that understand the data engineers, the data stewards, people that understand the data science or analytics or BI specialists, all the way up to the DevOps and to engineering, because those models are going to go live in an application. This is a big place that holds companies back because they're not used to collaborating in this way. And we were talking the other day about you can have a data science team that works just on data science. And I've seen this in other companies, not yours, but in other companies where I'll be like, okay, so where are we getting the data? And they're like, oh no, we have a department for that. We put in a ticket, they send it over. And we're like, okay. They need to be at the table with us. And when you're done, what are we going to do with the insights? Oh, we're going to put them in Excel and we're going to just flip them over the wall. And like, okay, those people need to be here too. That's not the way it should work. You're not this siloed independent organization. We need that collaboration across, because when they take those insights and they flip them over the wall, now you're asking an engineer to rewrite a data science model, machine learning model created by a data scientist. How's that work out usually?
Well, it doesn't work well. In fact, we were just sharing earlier this week where we've had a project which one of our early data science projects was creating what we call size profiles, which is for this jacket, like what's the range of sizes and distribution that we need to build. And a data scientist years ago, probably 4 years ago, created the algorithm. It was tuned. It was probably one of the best that we've ever seen coming out of tools, because the team went and shared it at conferences, right? So then handed it to an engineer, got recoded in Java, implemented, and literally 2 weeks ago, we realized that has been broken for 3.5 years. And so to the point we're just making is we're actually
sad.
It's very sad. And honestly, it's
And why was it broken?
It's broken because nobody owned it. And we didn't have the data science team to be able to continually iterate on the models, think of it as an asset, and actually have what we call data ops or data operation, where someone's looking at that and making sure it's working well. And so we're starting to bring those ways of working to life, but it's hard because you can't just do it all overnight. Just like a DevOps journey would be for software engineering. You need to go through the same journey for data science and analytics.
Well, and that's why bringing those, data engineers and DevOps have been working for teams for a long time. Bringing those wireframes for how you work as a team with data science is so important as well. Another thing that holds companies back, that they're not able to effectively work across. And I think in that case, you said something in the data pipeline just went wrong, and the engineering couldn't spot it, and you didn't know for 3 years. Oh God, I feel like an AI angel dies when I hear a story like that. Like it's just so sad. It's the best intention, but it just in the execution, it just didn't make it.
Didn't make it.
That's really sad. All right, so any advice? So if our friends here today were going to go out and participate in or lead an AI project, what would be your guidance to them?
I'd say 3 things. First, pick a small project to get started. Don't try to boil the ocean. Pick something that's contained enough to where you can show demonstrable progress in, let's say, a 2-month period of time. 2, make sure, as we just talked about, you have the right team you identify that's collaborative and cross-functional to solve this problem. And 3rd, I would highly recommend this, is leverage third parties and folks like IBM and others to help accelerate your journey at the beginning, because many of the problems we're solving are not unique. They may be unique to us as a company, but are not unique in the industry. So learn from others and liberally, I don't want to use the word steal, but share, learn from others and use best practices.
Well, I think there's such an open community around data science and AI that I think that's excellent advice. I would say that from working with companies like Gap and others, what's really interesting is when you go down this journey, you don't always know that you actually have the right tooling and the right stack internally. And there are times where, because the business doesn't always understand exactly what's happening in data science is, they're using their open source tools, they're doing things their way, and sometimes they're actually missing key things in that stack and they don't know it. And it means that their projects are going really slowly. You know, I sometimes use the analogy, I put two cars up on a screen and I'm like, one's got a 240 horsepower engine and one's got a 640 horsepower engine. Which is which? And they're like, I don't know exactly. Yeah. Like, you have to make sure that you take a look at the end-to-end life cycle of these projects to make sure that you're leveraging the tools and the technologies that actually make them go faster. And the thing about AI is that it's not additive. We cannot take the AI cherry and drop it upon existing systems. There's no AI fairy dust that we just sprinkle around the organization.
You don't have it? I thought you did.
Well, we have other things, but no. And they really require just different ways of thinking. They need all of these ecosystems underneath them. You cannot walk into a store and take, oh, I'll have 7 AIs and a cup of coffee to go, please. It's just, they're a bigger effort. And not just starting with the end, but setting that expectation with the business that it's not magic, so that they understand what are all of the components that are going to go into it, where do you need their guidance and their check-ins to make sure that you stay on track, and they also have the patience to let these technologies get developed properly and get implemented, because they take time, and like having the business stand there and like toe tap of like, okay, we need to get this done already is not helpful. So just setting that expectation is really important. All right, that's the time we have. Thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much.